It's out of time. Okay, right now we're on the space part of the tour, so let's go check out this stuff. Super Gamer.
Oh, it's the Discovery sometimes? No way, bro.
Okay, so this is the Space Shuttle Discovery, and it came to the museum on April 17th, 2012. How do I know that? Because I'm looking at this picture. Here's how it got here. Pretty neat, huh? So, this is a pretty big spacecraft, isn't it?
That is sweet.
No, it's a really big plane.
How big do you think that airplane is that it's riding on top of?
Really big.
It's huge. It's 747. Yes, it's a Boeing 747, a very special one. So they had they decided they were going to retire the whole shuttle fleet, and a lot of museums raised their hand and said, "We want one, we want one, we want one." And when they finally made their decision, we were really happy we got Discovery, because Discovery made more flights into space than any other shuttle. It made 39 flights into space, and while I have a lot of trouble remembering statistics, I remember this one. The total number of days it spent in space was 365. Pretty easy to remember. Days in space.
One year.
One time
A year.
over its life.
That is
Yeah,
pretty
during
cool.
over its lifetime. And so someone was asking me about the famous heat shielding tiles, which are very important. After every flight, they would inspect each and every tile. One of the curators tells us that on the tiles you see there, 70% are original and 30% have been replaced. And you can see real easily which is a new tile, which is an old tile.
These
Right,
over here
that's
to the left, right here. Right there. Yeah, because that's
Yeah, there's a bunch of them like that. But someone was asking about all the writing on the tiles. And the writing on the tiles is, tells exactly what the tile is and where it goes, because each one of these tiles is unique. And what they have is a big database. So they go in and they check out all the tiles, and they said, this one over here, this needs replacing. So they pry it off, they look at the numbers on the tile, they go into their database, and they make a brand new tile. And then they slap it back on. You know how they affix it? Glue. Yes, absolutely. A very special epoxy glue. That's how they get it on.
all right.
This is made out of a silicon material. It's about 90% air, and the rest is the silicon, spun silicon inside. The same for these blankets that you see over here. Those are also silicon blankets. The only different material on the shuttle, and that's because it's exposed to really high temperatures, something on the order of 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit. It's this over here. This is the carbon-carbon. And the leading edge of the wings over here, that's a carbon-carbon. And the leading edge of the tail, that's a carbon-carbon. This is the way the shuttle is launched. The shuttle sits on top of an external fuel tank. This fuel tank feeds these three engines, and it has two booster rockets. The booster rockets carry it for about 7 minutes up into space, and then they detach. They have parachutes affixed to them. They float back down into the Atlantic Ocean. They're recovered and reused again. The external fuel tank stays with the rocket, which stays with the shuttle, till it's actually out into space. And then it's used up all of its fuel, so these engines have no more fuel. It drops off, but when it enters the Earth's atmosphere, it disintegrates. So just dust comes down into the Earth. And then when it lands, who knows how it lands?
Landing gear? Landing gear like wheels.
Yeah, but it lands like a what?
Airplane.
Like an airplane. A very special kind of airplane. Anybody know why it's special?
Because it's got very important artifacts and information.
That is true, but here's the very special kind of airplane it is. When it lands like a glider. It's got no engines running. And so as a glider lands, and you've got an astronaut who's the pilot, how many attempts does he get for a successful landing? One. So the astronauts are not only pretty good astronauts, they're pretty darn good pilots as well, because they get one chance and one chance only to land this big old thing. Any questions on the shuttle? Yes.
Has there ever been like one of these like get really messed up because the landing was bad?
No, they never had a problem in landing, but there were two tragedies where they actually, yes, you know that, Columbia and Challenger.
I remember the Challenger.
Challenger is very sad, yes.
Has something like a nose and like go down in a retreat I know a lot of stuff come off of it, like has something really important fell off?
No, well, yeah, I guess you could say that. The problem with Columbia was one of the, something from the booster rocket came off and it hit the wing section over there and it broke away some of the protective material. So when Columbia landed, tried to come back into Earth, and it was getting so hot, it just burned up because the protective material had been broken away.
I have one question. What are the holes on the side here?
These are for maneuvering. It's maneuver. It's how they were able to dock with the International Space Station.
Oh, okay.
TDRSS. And what it is, it's up 25,000 miles up into space, and it orbits Earth at the same rate Earth rotates. So it's always over the same place in Earth. As we go around, it goes around. And what it does is it collects information from low Earth orbiting satellites. The satellites that get pictures for intelligence, the satellites that have communications in them, the satellites that do other things like that. And it takes them and it sends them from one to the next to the next till there's one that sits right over a ground station in New Mexico, and then it's sent straight down so we don't have to wait the 90 minutes for a satellite to come around again. We can get stuff in near real time. It's another British airplane.
My great-great-grandfather flew a Spitfire.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah. Which one's the Spitfire?
He would definitely know about the Hawker Hurricane that they were all from.
How come it's called the Spitfire?
They just named it that way. Spitfire.
What is this thing right here? When it shot,
Okay.
it
So let's talk about these two airplanes. These are the two airplanes that fought each other during the Vietnam War. You guys ever read about the Vietnam War?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. So what happened was the Department of Defense decided that there could be one airplane that would serve the needs of the Air Force, the Navy, and the Marine Corps. And they had a big competition. And the company that won it, McDonnell, built this, the F-4 Phantom. And because the Navy was the guys who proposed the F-4 Phantom, it was designed according to the way the Navy wanted it designed. And the Navy said that in this year, and we're talking here about 1960, missiles are the name of the game. Guns are obsolete. We don't need guns on airplanes anymore. So the F-4 was built without guns. But this airplane that was flown by the North Vietnamese, it's the MiG-21, it had guns. And so early on in the war, the North Vietnamese pilots discovered this. If in a dogfight we get really close to the F-4, the F-4 can't shoot the missiles.
They're not accurate.
Because, well, it's worse than that. It can't engage. It needs to engage by some distance. But they have guns, and they can just shoot the guns. So early in the war, we began to have this really big problem. The North Vietnamese were shooting down our F-4s before our F-4s could engage with missiles. So here's a problem. And the problem is presented to the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. And he says, they say to him, "Sir, we don't have any guns on our airplanes. They're shooting us down with guns. We can't use our missiles. What do we do?" So if you were Chief of Staff of the Air Force, what would you do?
Put guns on.
Put guns on the airplane. All of you guys are qualified to be the Chief of Staff of the Air Force.
Yes.
Because that's exactly what they did.
I'm like a heat seeker on it.
Wouldn't matter. You can't engage at that close distance.
You
So
always need guns.
the Air Force said, "Fine, we'll add gun pods here." Then they went back to the McDonnell Company and they said, "Okay, make us a F-4 that has guns inside it. Not that we have to add something to it." And so they build the F-4D, and it has guns inside it. Now, you're Chief of Naval Operations. You have the same problem presented to you. What do? Put guns on it. No! You see, I spent 22 years in the Navy, and I learned this one thing from my 22 years in the Navy. The Navy has never made a mistake. If they said they built an airplane and they needed to change it because it was made without the proper armament, that would be a mistake. That wasn't going to happen. So the Navy came up with another plan. They said, what we need to do is to train our pilots so that whenever they get into a dogfight, they always are able to stay a long enough distance away that they can engage the missiles. So they set up a school to train pilots to fly that way. And they're very successful. The Navy never adds guns to their airplanes. They continue to fly them only with missiles. But in every engagement, the Navy always was able, pilots were always able to stay a distance away that they could use their missiles. And so the Navy said, that's a pretty good idea. We ought to keep that school even after the Vietnam War. And they did. And that school is still around today. Anybody know the name of the school? Anybody ever see a movie with Tom Cruise? Top Gun. Absolutely. It was the Top Gun school that started during the Vietnam War to train pilots to stay a certain distance away from the enemy so they could always use their missiles. Yeah.
What's this stick on it?
That's the same thing you asked about the other airplane. It's the pitot tube.
Oh, okay.
It's what measures the speed. Yeah.
But what if we actually, you know how like they get really close and then
Yeah.
the wing hit that.
Yeah, well, I don't know that that's ever happened, but yes, it could.
Was this plane more nimble? I mean, this being such a big aircraft, it seems like this one could probably turn tighter and things like that.
Yeah, although the some of the automatic instrumentation inside the F-4 kind of enabled it to keep up with the MiG-21. At the end of the war, we had a very definite edge in kill ratio. Let's take a look at an airplane that was flown by the grandfather of one of our students.